For a limited time, we're giving away this Canon EOS RP. All you got to do is go to videomaker.com/win, and you can enter there to win this camera, the Canon EOS RP. Enter today at videomaker.com/win.
Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk all about streaming gear, live streaming gear for that matter. We agonized over this stuff a little bit more than a year ago, trying to figure out what are the categories. What if we sort of try to distill all the streaming gear into a handful of distinct categories? What would those categories be? So when someone asks, what kind of equipment should I buy for this purpose? Or this is my current setup, how can I make it a better streaming setup? What are the types of products that we really should consider? So we talk about switchers, encoders, I/O devices, that's input-output devices. We talk about all-in-one streaming boxes, and we talk about streaming software, these are the main categories which we've basically distilled it down into this. The one category that is missing, which we talk about a little bit at the end of the podcast, is PTZ cameras, pan tilt zoom cameras. We haven't done a ton of coverage on there in this category, but there's a lot going on here, so I think you can expect to hear more from us on this topic soon, and you'll see more of it on videomaker.com. But if you're interested in live streaming, or you plan to do some live streaming in the future, or maybe you're doing live streaming now and you wish it was better, you wish you had some different kind of equipment, I think you're going to find this podcast interesting and hopefully very helpful. So with all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, let's see, I'm going to say about 35 feet away and between two sets of walls is Chris Malnex.
Yeah, I wonder if we actually went through the wall, it'd probably only be like 10 feet, but...
Think so?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not really good at estimating distance.
It's got to be more than that, because Tara's office here between us is 12 feet.
Oh, so across. I guess you're probably right. Straight line, it's a little bit faster. Anyway, not that anybody matters.
Anyway.
We get caught up in that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so today we're going to talk about basically live streaming equipment. You know, buyer's guides have kind of been at the top of mind for us recently, because we're just getting a lot of traffic to these things. People seem to really like them. And Chris and Nicole and I, about, a little bit more than a year ago, decided we needed a live streaming equipment buyer's guide. And man, it was very difficult not only to pick what products should go in it, but pick what categories should go in it, because not everyone needs all the different types of categories of equipment, and it's really difficult, it turns out, to draw distinctions between one category and another category. So here's an example of what I mean by categories. If you go to a buyer's guide that we have about DSLR or mirrorless cameras, a category might be best camera for YouTubers, or online video, I should say. And another one might be best run and gun camera, right? So these are just like, you use these cameras for kind of different things.
Yeah.
One's for vlogging and the like. The other is like you're making movies. You need to be able to set it up on the go and be real versatile with it. That's pretty straightforward. With live streaming, there's these categories which are, well, we can get into the specifics, but there's devices that are really specialist. You know, they're designed to get your camera from one device to another. There's devices that are very general, like it's an all-in-one box. And there's some live streaming solutions which you don't need anything for. It's just like a piece of software you download for free on your computer.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the interesting thing about live streaming, right, is this was really just called broadcasting, right? Back before everybody had the internet to get it back into the game of broadcast, it was really that. And so we're talking about industry that really started in the television broadcast space. And so all the technology has been kind of pared down from that world. And so you end up getting these specialty tools, like you need, an I/O device, and then you need an encoder, or you need whatever you need. You need a couple different tools to work together. And that's how all television stations work. They have multiple systems that are trying to make it so some of it's going to a satellite, some going to the cable company, some's going off air, all the different things like that. And whereas live streaming's been, well, relatively new in the way of for everyone. And because of that, all those that could benefit from it are the whole gamut. You know, we're talking to churches, we're talking to municipalities, we're talking to single people who like to play video games online. You know, there's just a really big spectrum of the users that need this stuff, and all of them need something a little different. Yet the equipment might not vary that much. It's just more of what thing you pair with the other. Or in this case, this last year, we've actually seen quite a bit of innovation so that there are more all-in-one boxes that are just like, here, this is the thing you need to do this. Like IO Gear makes a thing that's meant just for a camera and a computer and to stream from. I mean, that's it. That's all it has. Whereas that kind of thing was a couple different tools, you know, more just over a year ago, it would have been a couple things together. Or if we at one point were like, how many inputs do you need to call it a switcher? Because you could get just a literal like button pressing kind of KVM type switch that can go between HDMI ports. Is that considered something that would, you know, it would work, but you'd have black between frames, that kind of stuff. I mean, it would work. I mean, it technically does the job, and it could be $20 instead of $200 or well more.
That's like the device that I used to have, my parents used to have, where you had your VCR and your Nintendo hooked up to your TV. You had to hit a little switch to go back and forth, right?
Exactly. Just a switcher in that way. So, I mean, that's the basic idea of a switcher, really. Yeah. I mean, the hope is that you wouldn't have black frames and there would be no time between when you press the button to make it happen. But so we were like, well, did we go that cheap? Well, no. But then you think about like, you know, people that do online streaming, they might not need any hardware. They might be able to use their webcam and some software and the game they're playing, and they're ready to stream. Whereas a church that wants to have, you know, a few different angles of 3 different areas now has, you know, 9 cameras and, you know, a plethora of microphone inputs and all the rest to have to deal and feed with. And then they, you know, the need might be not just to go to Facebook, but to go to Facebook, to go to YouTube, to, you know, try to go to different places. And so the needs, although the main idea of live streaming is the same, there's just so much in between. And we're, of course, making one guide over this category that's really quite large, but it's so emerging. And luckily, we're so well positioned to talk about video production in general that we're talking to small teams and talking to broadcast stations, low power broadcast stations, you know, the people that work there and the rest like that we're talking to those. We're also talking on like Creator Handbook to YouTubers and to gamers. And so, you know, we're trying to find these tools in kind of the Wild West. So that was the biggest debate of like, how does all this work? And I think that this, over the last year and a half or so, things have aligned themselves a little bit better. It's actually been a target for brands that are releasing things to actually say live streaming. Like Sony just released a firmware update for their, what is it, this VZ1 or ZV1, that now you can live stream from, you just plug it right into your computer and you can live stream from it. Whereas otherwise could use as a USB webcam, but now you could actually use it as an input device for your live stream or whatnot. Not terribly different, but that they're actually marketing that. Now, how different is the code to make that happen? I'm not really sure it's terribly different, although I don't know at all.
But something that to me articulates the kind of challenge that we faced was, where do you, like you were saying, where do you draw the line at a switcher, right? And you talked about the low end. If you can toggle between 2 cameras with no black frame in between, is that a switcher? Well, we actually had trouble with the next step above that. So you have a device that can take multiple camera inputs and switch between them. But what if that device doesn't connect to the internet without something's help? Something has to take that signal and push it to the internet, push it out to YouTube or Vimeo. So is this a switcher? And if a device switches and pushes the signal out to the internet, is that also a switcher? Do we compare these two things? Are they separate? Like, should we say, everything that switches between cameras is a switcher. But if it connects to the internet and pushes a video signal out, that's not a switcher, even though there's a switcher in it. That's another thing.
That's
and we got to compare all of those things that are similar to each other.
Yeah. Well, and of course, everybody's mixing everything up. And so you have companies like Roland that just often video switchers, but in paired with other things, they can be doing live streaming. There's no difference between doing a switch and a live stream, except for that last step, which is the encoding it so that it can be, put on the internet and do internet video. So we have tools that do all of those things. We have individual tools that'll do all those things. And the funny thing is, it's just like building your own computer. It's cheaper to buy all the parts and put it all together, and you'll have a more complicated system that has more capability likely, but you'll probably have a lot more complexity in the consistency of all of it working together, of it actually any of that stuff being compatible together, which isn't as bad these days, but that, you're having the things work together. So is it better to have an all-in-one and all that kind of stuff? And then I remember us if we can't talk about use case, because although, video gamer, that's easy, that's computer camera, but one step above that fits so many different needs and so many different aspects of two cameras switching between the two, and maybe a screen share or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we have all these things. And then now we have like the emergence of video conferencing amongst all that. So you get like that confusing bit of, well, my live stream can be in 4K and look beautiful, but when I do video conferencing, it looks like garbage. And it's like, although they instinctively feel very similar, they're actually very different. So we get really caught up in those aspects. But the cool thing is, I think with like the protocol for inputs to be seen as webcams is something that's happening a lot more often. So we have products like the A10 Mini Pro that I think does that, right?
Pretty sure it will.
Pro, yeah, and so you can connect right straight in, and that you can have 4 inputs, and that's pretty cheap for what it does, $600, but that's not really cheap to most people, especially if you're not trying to do anything that complicated.
So the question is like, if we're talking about use cases, if you're a church, we can't really say what's the best streaming tool for churches, because one church can do great with a Tricaster, while another church does just as well, or if not better, with a combination of a dedicated switcher and an encoder as separate devices, or an I/O device into a PC running Wirecast.
Totally. Or the other part of it, which can be using a camera that streams, like the GoPro Hero 9. You can stream from it. You control it with your phone. I mean, it goes to your phone and then goes up to you. But it can actually be your streaming device. So it's like we go from a camera that can do it, all the different little parts that can do it, and all the tools. Like, you have churches that are, the corner street church that might have, 30 people there on a Sunday on a normal year. And then you also have the mega church that has, is actually broadcasting on public access along with live streaming to thousands of people. You have such a wide gamut as far as the use case there in houses of worship. And we just talk about that because that's a pretty competitive category for especially the higher end live streaming. But then we have things like the Sling Studio, which is what we're using today. It's wireless. You can use your phone as one of the inputs, and we're seeing more of those types of live streamers as well. That are like, oh, you can implement your phone as one of the inputs. Now you're wireless with the phone. That's great. That works well for like say a school that has a baseball game or a football game, that the kids, the phones in their pockets can be the cameras, and you can switch between those and or go the next step of high end streaming setups that have like PTZs, so power tilt zoom cameras that are all remotely controlled. So you could have 10 cameras all being controlled by one person. There's such a gamut here, and really was broadcast, like I said before, but we don't really get into the really, really high end stuff. Although, $6,000 for the NewTek Tricaster Mini Advanced HD4, nothing to scoff at. $6,000 is still $6,000 regardless. Maybe if you're rich, that's not a big deal, but that's a lot of money to drop. So it better have a purpose and actually sit there. But the cool thing I think about all this is that you don't have to spend any money. Likely, if your computer has a webcam and you want to game and be on Twitch right now, you can do it. And there's actually some free software out there. So the very first thing on our list is best streaming software, and there's a thing called OBS, which is open source. I don't know what OBS stands
Broadcast, for. Open Broadcast
Source
System.
I don't know. But Streamlabs makes a version of it that's a little bit more intuitive than just normal OBS.
Open Broadcaster Software. Pretty straightforward. We should have guessed that.
Open Broadcast Systems app. That's what it says in our thing here.
Systems? Oh, we better
Broadcast Systems. Anyway.
OBS Projects is software.
Software. Oh, okay. We'll probably change that. Yeah, that makes sense. Software. Regardless, we'll correct that. And it's free, right? So you can bring your computer screen in, say it's a channel. This is a place where you can put overlays. They have the chat in there. So it's like, in fact, this is going to feel as native of a situation as you can with your computer. Very simple. Could be doing it now, so people can be doing this stuff right now. You can be making, you could have graphics on it. You can do all those different things. You can route your audio. You can do a lot of things with it, and pretty fantastic. Even enough that you can use OBS, and the output can be to your webcam. So it looks like, so you could actually live switch on a video call if, say, you wanted to. It's actually pretty flexible in the way it all sets up. So, like, you have a really low bar to getting in there. Now,
and we actually learned that OBS is also a great tool for Zoom calls, right? In that if you wanted to share full motion, video, full frame, not full frame, but full 30
screen.
frames per second. You can use OBS and set up so your desktop is your webcam and share video that way. Whereas normally it's like if you try to share your desktop in Zoom or something, it's 15 frames a second or something.
It's not as good. Although I just learned, because they just updated it, we just did a virtual event where we're using Zoom Webinar, which is different than normal Zoom. There's lots of different features, but it's a little bit different than regular Zoom. And it actually had a button that said optimize for video playback. So, and we actually had some presenters that used it, and it worked out great. OBS is when you have to be a little more complicated. I mean, the thing is it's not really very sleek if you're sharing your desktop and playing video from it, and then having to show your desktop and go to the next thing. If you can switch and make it all smoother, totally a better, more professional presentation, absolutely. So if you want to have a dynamic presentation over a Zoom, probably a good thing to do. You could totally have a lot more to it and have a more control over what you're doing there.
Yeah. Also, it's just easy, right?
Yeah. It's OBS, it's Streamlabs, especially. Like I used OBS and struggled with it, just more of like, okay, this isn't working the way I think it should, troubleshooting and doing those kinds of things. To Streamlabs, I had up and working with very easy, with a lot of ease. It's just far more intuitive. I'm guessing there's probably some limitations to its capability, being that why it wouldn't just completely replace OBS. But Streamlabs OBS is made by a different company, so I think there's that. But the cool thing is you can also use it when you have an I/O device or other things. It will see those things and help you interface with them. So it's really cool. If you want to step up from that, so open source is great, but who do you call when it doesn't work right? You're going to call the open source. You're not going to do that. So if you actually need support, there's a company called Wirecast that makes something very similar, definitely more robust. Telestream Wirecast, right?
Yeah, Telestream makes Wirecast.
Okay, yes, yeah, you're right. And what I've found actually, is that Wirecast is the built-in software for Microsoft's live streaming platform. What's that called? What were we using before we started to do
Microsoft's live streaming?
Is it Microsoft?
Platform? Microsoft has Teams, which kind of does.
But that's video calls. No.
You're thinking of IBM, which was Ustream.
Ustream, yes. So in Ustream, if you actually go into their built-in software, it's Wirecast, and just not labeled as Wirecast. Right. So you've probably seen it, and it's a lot more functional. Definitely more in the you're gonna have more of experience like you would like using a dedicated live switcher and software like what NewTek offers, which is hardware and software combined together to work together that are meant to have these routing to correct the routing issues. I'm sorry, that you might have when having to do a software switch, which ends up being just kind of weird things, like what's your input, what's your output, and trying to get all those things to work. You have to route those things, even though they're all in the computer, to tell it to use it that way. That's just how it goes.
So the software is great because it's the switcher and the encoder kind of together. Your computer maybe is the hardware behind the encoding portion of things.
Yeah, but so obviously you need a computer, and that's that's the other part of all this stuff is Sling, really cool product. We've had some great use for it here, but it requires a computer or an iPad to work. So you're talking about bare minimum entry cost at what the cost of the computer is. Then you add the other thing on there,
right?
Versus say what NewTek offers, which is the Tricaster Mini, and it's a computer with a screen on the side with inputs on it, so it's an all-in-one in that way, and you don't have to buy anything outside of it if you don't want to. So it's all completely turnkey.
We call this a streaming box.
Yeah,
which there's probably we couldn't find an industry term actually for whatever the NewTek Tricaster is.
Well, I think a lot of these categories aren't really if you go on B&H or Adorama and you start searching around, it's like live streaming equipment. It's really, and then you have just the whole moon stars under it. There's just so much.
We should probably call it like turnkey or something.
Yeah, that's what I think is like turnkey streaming system.
It's the multi-camera input, it's the switching, it's the encoding. And I guess that's it. That's all you need.
Yeah, and the interface and all the rest of it.
Yeah, the software interface.
Yeah. And the cool thing is it's all in one. It kind of reminds me of the way video editing computers used to be, that they were like these single-use computers that were meant specifically, like you wouldn't put them online, although obviously if you're live streaming you have to. And so, but of course you have the drawbacks of the idea of everything being in one. You're trusting that everything's going to continue to work in that thing, right? So if you have any problem with how it's working, you just have one thing it could not be working. You couldn't go, I'm going to replace my encoder because it's not encoding properly. Like the computer's not. It's a service call to calling up NewTek to have them figure out.
Because we actually had that problem with our NewTek, our Tricaster. It's like if you close down the software once you get inside of it, it's just like running Windows.
Except for you can't do anything.
Yeah, you can't do anything. You can't update the operating system until NewTek is ready for it to be updated, and it'll prompt you through the streaming software.
Now you
can't install Quake on it or something to play.
And the thing is, that's a strength, right? Is having this consistent, that's like all, just like your phone, why, an Apple iPhone is because it's all it's their hardware, it's their software, everything's all in there. And so, they want to make sure it's always going to work for you. So that's great. Now our issue ended up having is squealing on the input of the audio, which just couldn't get around.
Issue, right?
Yeah. And that was a hardware thing. And, we weren't able to get to the root of it. And then of course, at that point it started being obsolete because that was, before live streaming on social channels and stuff. So we tried to update it so we could do RTMP protocol, and it just wasn't having it because it was too old. And that's just happens.
There's a way that you can configure this yourself a little bit. So you'd look at NewTek or the Tricaster and go, oh, this is just a computer that has Windows and it runs a piece of software. The only thing that this has that my computer at home doesn't have is it can take 4 HDMI inputs, and that's where the I/O portion comes in.
Yeah.
So if you have your own powerful computer, you can buy a card that goes, a PCIe card that goes into your computer. We recommend the Blackmagic Decklink Quad HDMI. And now your computer has those video inputs, and you can run kind of whatever software you want at that point.
Then you can use OBS, you could whatever you want, and it could be in there. And the cool thing is this actually has a lot of uses. The more than just that, you could do a lot of things with this. This is if you had a video editing computer, now you have a video input. So if you have some video from a camera that you no longer have a deck to digitize with, if it has an HDMI out, you got it. If you want to have a big giant screen to really impress your clients with the playback video, now you have an out because it's in and out. It's pretty much you end up getting 4 in and out HDMI ports. So it's really fantastic. But then we look at it and it's $645. That's not cheap. This was a
$545.
I'm not wearing my glasses, so that 5 looks like a 6. But that this is something you needed to be able to do video editing 10 years ago or something to make your computer.
You had to like hit play on your camera and record on the computer.
Yeah, or when you wanted to play it back, you wanted to watch on a reference monitor, not a computer monitor, and that was when computer monitors, especially flat screens, were up to the task. They were not as nice enough to be able to do color critical work on them. Now they totally are. So having this is not as much of a need there. But going out to other decks of if you're having to go to any analog or to play out to something, it's super helpful to have this. And though it could be used for a lot of different things, but so say you could have your desktop computer, you throw this in there, you got Wirecast. Now you have 4 inputs. It's in essence the same exact thing as the NewTek, except for of course NewTek has their optimized software in there and all the support for that. And of course you have to deal with the compatibility of trying to make sure, say you have some problem with this card. Are you calling Blackmagic? Is Blackmagic going to say it's your computer? I always run into this with computer companies. It's always someone else's problem. Not that they're trying to push it off. It's that they can only go to so far and go, well, I'm not that company and we don't do the service for them. So you got to talk to them about that next part. And then in that gray area between the two, neither one of them wants to touch it. And then you're like, oh crap.
But always had that problem with Apple. Apple would, you'd have some sort of problem, and Apple's solution is unplug everything that's not made by Apple.
Yeah, exactly. And then see how it goes. Yeah.
And I actually ran into this problem a number of times with a Blackmagic deck link. It wasn't a PCIe, it was an external one. Yeah. But yeah, same thing. Had to unplug the Blackmagic. Then I could update all the software on the computer, and the computer wouldn't even boot up. With this Blackmagic installed.
I've totally had that issue. Well, I've had that with other hardware, not just Blackmagic. I want to be clear here. I've had USB dongles in my computer that the computer just wouldn't even start up because I had it plugged in. So it's just more of a third-party issue of who's at fault here. It doesn't work with this thing, but we can't make it work with every computer. That seems really, I mean, they try and they do a really great job, most brands, at making things quite universal in computers, but you're going to run into those small compatibility issues, which are, fine to deal with if you're a small, you're a YouTuber doing these things outside of a professional world. But as soon as you have expectations from, being paid on something, having a makeshift setup might not be to your advantage because you're just going to run into probably these compatibility issues and just the problems you run into with. You could build a really amazing computer and just every once in a while you'll have a compatibility. You bought the wrong RAM, you bought the wrong motherboard, and it just doesn't want to work with this other thing, and they just are mad at each other. And you're gonna have to wait till a driver comes out in 6 months for it to actually want to play nicely. And some people, I have a friend that just won't accept things not working together, and he'll get down to the middle of it, and then he'll supply all that information to the manufacturer. And lucky for them, that's really quite fantastic. But most people don't have more than just, I know my biggest thing is close it all down, shut it down, restart the computer, unplug all the peripherals, see if it all, see what happens, try to do all your updates. And, as soon as it starts to get into I have to undo screws to do something, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to really get down to the nitty gritty of what's not working here. I'm not a pull out your multimeter and figure it out where everything's, touching each other and making it all work. But, so that's the thing you get from having multi things. So I think the one of the coolest setups we have that are out there is the Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro.
Yeah. And so this is like we talked about using software on your computer. using a little piece of hardware to get the cameras into your computer so you can use the software. We talked about basically that all in one, like in a streaming box, like a new tech. This is like you could really kind of do this without a computer. You get an A10 Mini Pro, and it'll do all the switching, and you can plug it into an encoder, which is a little box that basically just connects to the internet, and you're off. You don't no computer required, right?
No, no. In fact, I think you might be able to. It's definitely got Ethernet input. I think you still need a computer or some kind of encoding device to get the information out. But
for the A10, yep.
What you're not getting here is no preview, no program, so you're not being able to see those things. But you're getting a lot of other things like I think downstream keying and some some overlay capability and some video playback. But in an analog piece of equipment, you're pressing input 1, pressing input 2, and it's cutting in between, directly in between them. And it was really the A10 Mini, not the A10 Mini Pro, that came out that gave us the aha, we can do this list. It was kind of that thing that was like, oh, that's the only thing that's doing that's in between all this that we can find out there. And that was doing it through the webcam protocol. This goes one step further, or you could go out HDMI, go to an encoder and do that kind of thing. But that this allows you to preview program. And if you have a computer, it just goes right to it. So it's not a standalone, which, you're not going to find anything, and you need some kind of processing to be able to get it to the internet. You need to convert that information to what the protocols need. And so really a lot of this stuff is like, then add the computer or add the peripheral, like some of the IO gear stuff use just an iPad. So, you don't have to get a real great one, but that's the interface that that's how you're going to be able to live stream or deal with seeing the inputs and whatnot.
Yeah. In this case, you add the computer just so you can do some configuration. You don't need the most powerful machine, you can get your hands on.
Yeah, exactly. And encoding and that kind of stuff is not, we have like an encoder on here that's exactly this, which is a best live stream encoder, which is the data video NVS33 H.264 video streaming encoder and MP4 recorder. And the cool thing is that you could just record out to it, go to H.264. And I remember, the thing is, data video has been doing this kind of stuff and even small little systems, but they've been definitely marketed to the house of worship category, churches and whatnot. And all of their stuff is not pretty. It's all quite ugly boxes that do stuff. They're very functional over form, and that's fine. I mean, it's not like any of this stuff really needs to be beautiful at all. And this is, I remember when, I don't know how many. It was one of the years where live streaming was the talk. I think it was just after Facebook started allowing external inputs rather than just your app on your phone to go live streaming. So you could actually have the RTMP protocol so that you could actually fish in nice cameras and whatnot. And they had standalone switchers that would give you, same thing, give you a preview. It's like a little suitcase. It had inputs on it and all your switching, and it gave you preview program and a T-bar to switch between stuff. And then it just went out. And so their idea was, we'll make a little encoder that you go into it and you can go out there. And the nice thing about this is that you could actually, before it's going to the web, you can actually be recording it onto this just to I think it's an SD card. And you just plug it SD card. And so then you can capture the stream in nice quality before it goes, because once you go streaming, we're talking 3 megabits to 8 megabits, really low quality. So if you have some other need for it, like I've seen an artist that has been doing live streams, or a musician that's doing live streams every Friday, and he has an amazing recording studio, and he's actually been recording it all so that he can release like all the best performances and put them together and make like an album that he can sell because they've been really great performances. That's really neat. but he's been doing it with his GoPro. So he's going back to the well of the recordings on Facebook really to do that. And it's like, your video is not going to look really great, but your audio will sound great. He definitely had really high end stuff. I've actually been communicating with him, trying to go, hey, let's do a higher end stream for you. But it's all about, knowing what you're going to do with the stuff. If you're trying to do it for a church, what are you trying to achieve? You can get really thick in the weeds with this stuff. And like we've been complaining about, really that you can get so deep in it, but really comes down to, how many cameras do you need? What are you presenting? Where are you presenting it to? And if you think of those those things, then all of this gets a lot more simple because there's a lot of things not to consider. You can then go, oh, I only need 3 cameras. Cool. Then I don't need anything that has, for whatever reason, they always do an even. So like, I doubt you'll find something with a 3 input. You'll find a 4 input. And okay, cool. I only need a 4 input. Cool. Now I have far fewer things to choose from. Okay. Now do I want to use a switcher and then to an encoder and then to a computer? Do I want to have it all in one? And then it's a lot easier to pick from there. And that's really what we did here is once we figured out, okay, these are the things that someone's going to be looking for. And these are all, because we talking about recommending just computer parts like the IO device is a little bit outside of what we normally do, right? Like we're not talking about buying the sensor of your camera. I don't even know what anything else that has a somewhat similar situation as this, but we don't talk about the individual parts. We talk about the whole thing. And this is a little different because it is not, it's far more Wild West category, even though I think that the category has been open for a while. And like I said at the beginning of this, the broadcasting companies, the companies have been making stuff for TV stations and, that kind of thing. They are far easier to adapt to this category than coming from nothing. But there's companies that are coming up with really like Sling Studio. I don't think they have anything else. Like they have Sling, which is, a TV product from Dish Networks, but that like they just have this one thing and it's been out for a few years. We've been using it. And the big key thing for me for using it, it's simple. It has the amount of inputs we have. And the big thing for me is wireless because HDMI cables everywhere is not a good setup for something that's temporary. We break this down every week. And so because of that, the fewer wires we can do, the better. And, the batteries live long enough on these transmitters that we can do the longest form we do with them. So, this is a good fit for us. But it was also something we had already. We probably would have used something else because it's unlikely we would have bought anything for it, just being that we're Videomaker. But, it suited our needs really very well. But as soon as we needed anything more complicated than just this dual screen, we'd probably be pretty phased out of this.
Yeah, it's the Sling Studio is an interesting product because it goes back to that same issue of like, what category does it go in? Is it the streaming box? It's probably the streaming box, but like you said, you got to have a computer or a laptop just to run it.
Yeah,
just to control it. So
yeah, exactly. You can't do it without it. So maybe that's another category, and maybe that's an emerging category. But there wasn't many when we were thinking of this, and that's our buyer's guide.
We need to add a new subcategory for this, right? So this is best live streaming equipment. The one piece, well, maybe there's more that we just don't know about. There is one piece of live streaming equipment that has no other home in any of our buyer's guides, which is PTZ cameras.
Yeah. And PTZ cameras are pretty neat just in the way of like remote production in general. And they live there, but they also live in broadcast, but we don't cover, like, we're not talking to engineers about the next thing they need to buy for their TV station, so to speak. I mean, maybe cameras and those kinds of things, but definitely not the back end of a TV station. Right. We're not talking about the stuff that's sitting in the racks very often. And so we're kind of in that space here with this, but I think the top of the line, turnkey solution from NewTek is like $60K, or maybe it's $50K. But regardless, it's big enough that I wouldn't consider it because I'm not doing anything that would justify having such a robust system. But like with them, you can get a call from any video conferencing, even if you have 15 or if you have 8 people on screen, it will choose all of those 8 screens, make them 8 different inputs, and now you can cut between them because you're having a conversation or whatever. You can have a whole bunch of Skype calls coming in and be able to have everybody hear themselves and switch between them. I mean, those are some really robust abilities. I mean, I remember at the TV station, we wanted to get a call in, just have someone call and have the report or the anchor talking to the person calling in, and that was more difficult than us doing a live feed from 15 miles away because of the communication barrier. And it always ended up being that if they had headphones up at the front, they could have headphones and then they could hear it and they could talk just fine. But it was like this weird combination of and I imagine everybody's dealt with this a little bit on video calls of you can hear yourself back and there's a little bit of feedback loop and not enough control to actually get rid of it or what have you. So those higher end issues seem somewhat simple, but there's a lot of back end to make those things happen. And so, the complexity of this can be very, very deep. I think we're missing a category that just needs a computer live streamer. I also think that some of the things that are trying to help gamers so they can have a dedicated camera, not a web camera, and a computer input and control it from a computer, not all in one, so that you have, might have actually two different internet providers for those two things, so that your stream is not dependent on the internet speed you need to be able to game correctly,
right.
And all those kinds of things.
I mean, redundancy.
Yeah, if you're talking about competitive gaming, having the fastest frame rate speed on your internet as well as the fastest refresh rate on your screen, that could mean the difference between life and death in your game. Especially if it's really competitive. So any bandwidth you can spare to make sure the game plays smoothly you want to do, but you want to be able to share it too. So I think that's the catch. And so there's a little category there now that's like actually being fulfilled outside of just a little peripheral here, a little accessory here. We'll put these things together and we'll make something that works. There's even more things. And we even talked to about the Elgato products that are overlay systems or
they're just they're graphic machines, right?
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, this kind of there's a number of products that are specialty that have been around for decades.
Oh yeah.
One of them is dedicated to hardware for live graphics.
Absolutely.
And there's instant replay machines.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And those are big specialties. And I mean, that's it's funny because when we first heard about Sling, they were very early on this small production value but functional live streaming setup. But when we went and saw them the next year at NAB, it was like, so what's new? And they're like, we did 4 updates. And I was like,
yeah,
wow. But one of them was a live score. So you could have an RSS feed that could live score in there. And the other was being able to queue up playback so that you could be doing a football game. And as they're taking a break because a kid broke his arm, they can go back and do the slow-mo of watching him broke his arm, and see that. And that's somewhat difficult in the way of live stream, because it's needing to store it and then allow you to play it back immediately. And if you think about football games, I just on a side note here, they do crazy 8K, 240 frames a second playback almost instantly right after a part of the game happens. And if you think about the amount of data that's being made, if you're shooting at that, it's just crazy. But with that, I think Mike's camera just died. So we will.
The light's on.
Yeah, the light's on, but your transmitter. Yeah, the battery's just about dead. So I'm going to end it there. And,
my voice is coming through, right?
Yeah, your voice is coming through. So you're just dark there. But
in that case, while we're closing, I will pick my nose.
Yeah,
now that I have this opportunity, no one can see.
Yeah.
It's a category that's gone through quite a bit of innovation over the years, and we'll go through quite a bit more. And we're going to do our best to keep up with it. Make sure that we're recommending the right product. So,
and we're trying to
camera.
Yeah, well, and we're trying to be leaders in this. The idea of thought leadership in streaming is a void, and we want to make sure that people, not only are we educating you on how it all works, but also recommending the best products. So
yeah. Okay, so since we have a dead camera, we should probably call it there.
I think so.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Big thanks to everyone for listening. As always, if you listen to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher and hit the subscribe button. It's really convenient for you. It'll deliver the podcast straight to your mobile device every Monday morning, and you can listen to it in the car that way if you're driving anywhere these days. You don't have to think about using up all your data because it'll just be downloaded and ready to go. So, as always, for Chris Monlex and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.